UFC Vegas 60, Draftkings has released the salary so we can take our first look. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Last week was a fun week of fights. I know a lot of you guys did really well. You sent me messages, you sent me comments. Congratulations. A lot of the value plays came through last week. Dennis Talulin beat the brakes off of Jamie Pickett after losing a point. Johnny Walker came through with a big performance. Juliana Rosa did work. So we hope to carry that momentum into this. Oscar, are your shoes on the wrong feet? So we hope to carry that momentum from last week into this week, and we're going to start right at the top of the slate and work our way down at 9,700. Pricey. Is Joe Pyfer. He's going to be making his official UFC debut this week against Alen Amedovski. You might remember Joe Pyfer from the first episode of this season of Dana White's Contender Series, where all the fights sucked except his, where he picked up a knockout, so Uncle Dana gave him a contract. It was well deserved. Joe Pyfer is a beast. I expect a first round finish in this fight. We'll take a look at Pyfer by knockout in the first round as a prop later in the week, because that seems like the most likely outcome here. He's got good size for the division, heavy hands, and he's going to be the much younger man in this fight. And a little secret for you, Alen Amedovski is ass. He's 0-3 in the UFC. He's pulled out of a ton of fights. He's coming off of back-to-back first round stoppages, and he's shown us that he's pretty chinny. This is a promotional setup for Joe Pyfer, and I don't have any issue with it. I love it because it makes it predictable from a DraftKings perspective. You know he's going to get around 105 to 115 points. Maybe more since the quick finish is on the table. We saw Amedovski get finished in 17 seconds by John Phillips, so that is there. He could score north of 120. But obviously the price is not nice. 9,700 is crazy. I don't know if I've ever seen somebody more expensive than Joe Pyfer. And yeah, he's going to score a ton of points. I'm very confident in that. But what you need to consider is how many fights we have. We have 14 fights on this card. If that number holds, that's a lot of fights. I have a hard time seeing Joe Pyfer finding his way on the winning lineup. There are so many opportunities for fighters to post scores north of 100 points. If you're interested in Cory Sandhagen this week, it's going to be really difficult to get to Joe Pyfer unless you have some really cheap underdogs that you're interested in this week. But for cash, I can support the idea of going with Joe Pyfer, but in your tournaments, I'm staying away. The pick for me in this fight, however, is going to be Joe Pyfer, and it's going to be by knockout. Next at 9,500, we have Loma Lookboonmee. DraftKings has made this really easy for us because Loma Lookboonmee is carrying a Jailton Almeida-esque price tag this week. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to get here this week. I don't want you to get here this week either. I do expect her to win. She's fighting Denise Gomes. Gomes is making her UFC debut, but Loma Lookboonmee is not going to score you over 100 points. Again, she wins, and she wins because she's fought the better MMA competition, has a lot more striking experience outside of the UFC. She's shown some good durability and cardio to keep a consistent pace, and I expect her to pick Gomes apart, dominate the clinch with knees and elbows. The only aspect of the clinch that worries me personally this week, and I say personally because I'm not worried for Loma in the slightest, I'm worried that she scores a lot of points because she's pulling off sweeps and trips, leaning on that Muay Thai. And if she quietly puts together a 5+ takedown performance and lands a lot of strikes, she might score a lot of points. But I don't know if that's happening. Even with those takedowns, I don't know if she's sniffing 100 DraftKings points. So that slight concern isn't enough for me to want to get there. I don't have any exposure of her this week. I wouldn't recommend that you have any either. I do think she wins 30-27 across the board. The pick for me is Loma Lookboonmee by decision. Next at 9,400, we have UFC newcomer Daniel Zellhuber this week. He's going to be fighting Trey Ogden this week. Zellhuber is long for the division. He's at 155 pounds, standing at 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. And I think that's significant because on the feet, I think he can give Ogden serious trouble. He also has solid output. We saw that on his Contender Series fight with Lucas Almeida. Granted, that kind of pace is what you expect when somebody's fighting Lucas Almeida. He brings that kind of fight, but he did look good in that bout. He's undefeated. He's 12-0. He's only 23 years old, and I could see him being a very popular play this week, but I think that Trey Ogden's going to pack this kid up. This is a big step up in competition for Zellhuber, who's largely fought very low-level guys outside of the UFC. He has smoked all of them, as he should, but one fight when looking back that really stood out to me that I want to bring your attention to is the fight with Gianfranco Cortez. Currently has a professional record of 4-4.
Damn.
This guy was getting Zellhuber down at will, but he was giving up positions. He was getting swept. He was not really doing well from top position. That won't happen with Trey Ogden, who's 32 years old. He's got that grown man strength.
I'm a man. I'm 40.
He has nearly as many submissions as this kid has fights, and he didn't look great against Jordan Levitt in his UFC debut. But more often than not, I think we can all agree that fighters typically perform less than their best in their UFC debut. Plus, it was against a grappler in Jordan Levitt who did a good job of nullifying Ogden's offense on the mat, so that's not a great matchup for him. Now Ogden has the debut out of the way. He's got a long, lanky kid who hasn't faced much adversity in the cage, and I think this could be a scary good underdog this week. I think the consensus is that Ogden gets knocked out here, but this guy's never been knocked out, and if this fight as much as hits the clinch at all, he's going to be in the driver's seat. This is a shiny new toy all the way. This is a situation where the bookies are pretty much daring you to put him in your parlays to beef up the odds, but I'm telling you right now, I don't think the line is correct for this fight. I could see Zellhuber being the favorite, but he's a bigger favorite at least on DraftKings than I would like to see, and I do think that this is a bad matchup for him. The pick for me in this fight is going to be Trey Ogden, and it's going to be by submission. And I'll tell you now, you're going to hear me say that a lot today. As I went through these fights and was looking at matchups, I think there's going to be a ton of submissions on this card. Next, we have Nikolas Motta. He's coming in at 9,300. He's going to be fighting Cameron VanCamp this week. Motta's coming off of a knockout loss in his debut to Jim Miller. He was the favorite there, and old Jim Miller took him behind the shed. And as an MMA fan, it was awesome to see. And it's also good to see that he's coming back because the guy is talented. Is he UFC caliber? I think time will tell. But regardless, he has a style that makes for fun fights because he throws bombs on the feet. Not the best output in the world, but he's not afraid to get in the pocket and slug it out. On the other side, you have Cameron VanCamp, who's looking to do the opposite. He wants to wrestle, he wants to get on top, work his jiu-jitsu from there, and he can strike. We saw him kicking Fiallo's ass before he got clipped in the first round. But that was his UFC debut. That was up at 170 pounds. Big difference here. He's going to be at 155 pounds, and this guy's going to be massive for the weight class. He's going to be standing at 6'2" versus the 5'9" on the side of Nikolas Motta. Nikolas Motta and I, fun fact, have the same amount of submissions in professional MMA. 0. And that worries me for a big favorite this week. He's giving up size, presumably giving up a lot of strength, and he's going to be at a massive grappling disadvantage. And just like the last time that he fought, I think that the under is the best bet that you can make in this fight, but my prediction is for the underdog to get the win here. And just like the last time he fought, I think the under is the best bet that you can make on this fight, but as a prediction, I am going to go with the underdog to get the win. For DraftKings, Cameron VanCamp is super cheap, and he does a lot of things for you in your lineup when you plug him in. If you think that he and Trey Ogden can pull it off, then you might be able to pay up for Joe Pyfer. And we'll talk more about that in the final picks video later in the week, but the pick for me in this fight is going to be Cameron VanCamp, and it's going to be by submission. Next at 9,200, we have Cory Sandhagen. He's our main event favorite. He's fighting Song Yadong this week. This is a great fight to stack for cash games. I like the movement, the endurance, the pace of Cory Sandhagen. We saw that in his last 2 fights. And for this fight, I like that his last 2 were 5-rounders, even though they were close decisions that he ended up losing. I like that they were 5-rounders. I like that they were main events. It just goes to show how much respect the promotion has for this man and his skills. And when he wins on DraftKings, he's typically putting up very good scores, and I don't think it will be any different this week. Now here on the other side, we have Song Yadong, young, powerful puncher, very solid everywhere, but he's lacking that 5-round experience. He has that questionable win over Chito Vera, so that's impressive, but I'm not impressed with the demolition job that he did on Marlon Moraes, who lost his magic long ago. And we've seen Song Yadong drop the 3rd round before. We saw him lose the 3rd round in his fight against Cody Stamann. We saw him lose the 3rd round in his fight against Marlon Vera. And I think after the 2nd round is when we're going to see Cory Sandhagen really take over. Song Yadong's tough, but I think we see a late finish from Sandhagen this week, not only because of the experience and the cardio, but also the diversity of attack on the feet. Yadong likes to throw big winging hooks at times, and if he throws a big overhand punch and dips his head, Cory Sandhagen might time a flying knee. We might also see wheel kicks from him, elbows, extended combinations, and I think Yadong is going to just be a step behind, especially the longer this fight goes. So the pick for me is Cory Sandhagen by knockout sometime after the 2nd round. Next at 9,100, we have Trevin Giles. He's going to be fighting Louis Cosce this week. Giles has been more active. We haven't seen Cosce fight in 2 years since he lost to Sasha Palatnikov, which is not a good look. But since then, we've seen Trevin Giles fight guys like Roman Dolidze, Dricus du Plessis, Michael Morales, Morales. The man's been swimming with sharks, and now he's going to swim with an aggressive otter in Lucas Cosce this week. I think Cosce does have a chance, though, if he's able to catch Giles early, but I do see his cardio starting to fall off a cliff after the first round, and the very steady Trevin Giles is going to start taking over from there. When you talk about Trevin Giles, you have to talk about the jab. He's got a great jab, and it's only gotten better along with the rest of his game, and he's stepping right into his fighting prime at only 30 years old. This is a great opportunity for Trevin Giles to get back on track, improve his trajectory in his career, and I see him winning a decision this week. From a DraftKings perspective, I never recommend playing Trevin Giles. Like we talked about last week with Jamie Pickett, he's not some guy that I would ever play. He's not super aggressive. He doesn't really have big power. His grappling bag is not that deep, so his scoring ceiling is normally not all that high. If one of these weeks I don't play him and he goes nuclear, I'll be fine with it. I'll eat it because I'm playing the odds here. But this week I do expect him to win. I do expect him to win a decision, but from a DraftKings perspective, I'm going to stay away. But next at 9,000, we have Pat Sabatini. He is going to be fighting Damon Jackson this week, and this is a tough one for me because Pat Sabatini is a bad matchup for almost anyone in the weight class. His control is ridiculous. He uses trips in the clinch very well, especially up against the cage, and he does a great job of staying busy on top in most cases. On the other side, you have Damon Jackson, who's a dog. Jackson is gritty. He fights until the very end. He's got sneaky physical strength. I think his strength surprises guys when he gets in there, and he's a strong grappler in his own right. This fight is going to come down to who can stay in dominant position longer. It's going to hit the mat, no doubt. You got two guys who absolutely want to be down there. Of course it's going to get there, but the one who spends more time in a dominant position is going to be the one that wins this fight, and I expect that to be Pat Sabatini. And I say that because he has better takedown defense than Damon Jackson. Damon Jackson doesn't defend a takedown all that well, and Damon Jackson can't strike. He was getting lit up on the feet by Dan Argueta his last fight, who was stepping in on short notice. I expect Sabatini to get multiple takedowns per round here, score his usual around 100 DraftKings points. Damon Jackson is great against guys who he can break and guys who he can out-grapple, but I don't think he could do either of those things against Pat Sabatini, and ultimately, I think Sabatini finds his back, finds a rear naked choke. The pick for me is Pat Sabatini by submission. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works, and I appreciate when you do it every time. Next at 8,800, we have Tanner the Bulldozer Boser. He's going to be fighting Rodrigo Nascimento this week. Tanner Boser's a cool heavyweight because he's one of these lighter heavyweights who relies on movement and speed, and that movement and speed turns into power, which lately has been resulting in finishes. He's as tough as they come, only having been finished once in his entire career. Now, he hasn't beaten elite competition in the UFC. His UFC record is 3-4. Those wins are coming over Daniel Spitz, Felipe Lins, who's not a heavyweight, nor might he be UFC caliber, and then Rafael Passoa, who's no longer in the UFC, he's losing fights in another promotion, and old Vince St. Preux. On the other side, Rodrigo Nascimento, who is a big heavyweight, he's probably going to weigh in 20 pounds heavier than Boser does. He's got power, just like everybody else in the division, but he relies more on his grappling, and that's where he's going to have a huge advantage this week. If he's able to get Boser down, I think it's a wrap. He's going to find a submission. On the feet, I think it's very close. I give the edge in power to Nascimento, and I give the edge in speed to Boser, but my issue with Boser is that he doesn't fare well against legit heavyweight fighters who fight at a high level. The guys we mentioned he beat before, Nascimento would beat all of those guys in the first round, and we've seen from a lot of the past UFC events, most of them, that the heavyweight fights, you have to target them. They've been finishing like crazy, and a lot of these fights in the weight class are pretty obvious. You know, like for example, Cyril Gane's gonna smoke Tai Tuivasa. You know that Sergey Spivak probably runs through Augusto Sakai, but with fights that are a little bit closer and harder to call, like last week with Collier and Barnett, you want to go with the underdog in those situations because the likelihood of these fights finishing very, very high. So in this fight, I want to take the guy who has more ways to win. I want to take the guy who's got more tools in the toolbox. Give me Rodrigo Nascimento by submission. Next at 8,700, we have Fluffy Hernandez. He's going to be fighting Marc-Andre Barriault this week. Hernandez put on a clinic in his last fight against Josh Fremd. He got 8 takedowns. He made him work. He looked for submissions over and over. Ultimately, he won every round. He brings into this fight a 70% takedown accuracy, which is crazy high. Normally, you see good grapplers coming in just below 40%, so 70% is next to unheard of. We've seen Barriault taken down in almost every UFC fight he's had. He was taken down twice by Jordan Wright, who's a striker through and through. And Barriault has good output, but he tends to stand straight up, and he doesn't have much power, and I don't see him being able to keep up with the pace that Fluffy Hernandez is going to put on him this week. I think we see rinse and repeat takedowns for Hernandez, and I think we see a choke in the 3rd round, specifically that arm-in guillotine that he hit on Vieira and the one that he kept looking for against Josh Fremd. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came sooner, but I expect it to come late because Marc-Andre tends to slow down the later the fight goes, and I think he's going to have more difficulty fighting off the choke the more tired that he gets. And again, this week I think you see more subs than a Jersey Mike's, and we can add this to the tally here. The pick for me is Anthony Hernandez by submission. Next at 8,600 we have Javid Basharat. He's going to be fighting Tony Gravely this week. Javid Basharat is so technical in all areas of the game. He's got good striking, good offensive and defensive wrestling, and he's very calm in his fights, which normally leads to high fight IQ. I like his steadiness to serve him well this week because it's going to be his steadiness versus Tony Gravely's explosiveness. And at bantamweight, I prefer the steadier fighter. But down here at 135 pounds, give me the guy who's going to fight the same in the 3rd round as he does in the 1st round versus the guy who might gas after 1.5. Now, Tony Gravely, most of the time, is DraftKings gold. We can't ignore that. He's got powerful striking that leads to knockdowns, and he's got some of the best takedowns in the division. And you can be sure that whoever does win this fight is going to end up on the optimal lineup. Whether you think that's Tony Gravely, I wouldn't be mad at you, or if you think that's Javid Basharat, who is taking a big step up this week. But I still think that Basharat has the tools to get it done. I think that he's the more well-rounded fighter. He's way more dangerous when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So we may see another potential submission in this fight. Nearly all of Gravely's losses have come by submission. So if he's shooting for takedowns, I could see him getting put in a bad position, get caught with a darsh, and we see a quick tap. And considering that Basharat is a finisher of the highest order, almost all of his fights are by finish, I think that's a pretty likely outcome. So I think we see one of two things happen here: Tony Gravely knockout or Basharat by submission. We have to choose one, and it's going to be Javid Basharat by submission. Next at 8,500 we have Gillian Robertson. She's going to be fighting Mariya Agapova this week. This fight is interesting because I think if this fight stays on the feet, Gillian Robertson's getting smoked. But she has a clear advantage in terms of grappling and physical strength. And aggression, grappling, and physical strength are huge factors in women's MMA, especially against Mariya Agapova, who's a great hammer but a terrible nail. We saw Marina Moroz beat her up her last time out. We saw Shayna Dobson smoke her out, and now she's got a bad matchup against Gillian Robertson. And Agapova has had success in the UFC, like against Little Hannah Cyphers or Sabina Mazo, who might be the weakest fighter on the roster. But Robertson has the experience, the wrestling, the grit to win this fight. I see her winning a decision here. I'm hoping that it's a decision. I'm hoping that Agapova can at least survive on the mat because I'm not looking to put Robertson into my lineups this week. But don't be surprised if Robertson finds herself in mount and ends up landing some ground and pound, finishing the fight via TKO or, of course, submission this week. If Agapova ends up giving up her back, trying to get back to her feet, I think that can really happen. But I think the most likely outcome here is going to be Gillian Robertson by decision. Next at 8,400, we have Aspen Ladd, who doesn't have a nickname, but if she did have a nickname, it would be the Fraud. Aspen Ladd has been beyond disappointing for the last few years. Even her last win against Yana Kunitskaya, she was losing convincingly until she went full throttle in the 3rd round and found the finish. Before that, she got stopped with one punch from Germaine Durandamy, did virtually nothing against Norma Dumont. She landed 33 significant strikes in a 5-round fight. That's crazy. That's a little over 1 significant strike per minute of that fight. Then she loses to Raquel Pennington in a fight that she easily could have won if she just started fighting earlier. In that fight against Pennington, on the feet, she looked like a mime directing traffic. And when she finally did decide to get aggressive, she was able to find success grappling. She was able to get some takedowns. Now she goes against Sara McMahon, who's going to wrestle, wrestle, and wrestle. If Aspen Ladd gets off to a slow start and finds herself fighting from behind, she's going to lose a lot of people money once again. And normally, I wouldn't want to go with the fighter who's going to be 14 years older than their opponent, but I do think that she has the tools to win this fight, and I think another underwhelming performance is coming from Aspen Ladd. And I think it's an arm triangle that's on the way for Sara McMahon, who's not going to be bullied. Aspen Ladd has success against people that she can bully. She can't bully Sara McMahon. I think she's too strong, she's too experienced, and she's going to fight a good game plan. So the pick for me is Sara McMahon by submission. Next at 8,300 is Andre Fili. He's going to be fighting Bill Algeo this week. Andre Fili has been around forever. He's fought some of the best fighters in the division, and we got to watch him grow as a fighter at the highest level from a really young age. One of the most most underrated names in all of MMA is Andre Fili. What I like about Fili is his length, his endurance, his wrestling. Bill Algeo struggles with his takedown defense and struggles on the ground. He tapped against Herbert Burns and the ref didn't stop the fight, which is crazy because we saw the tap, but you see Stephanie Egger not tap against Mayra Bueno Silva and they just call it. MMA. Gotta love it. And Algeo goes on to win that fight, and I think that to this day, Herbert Burns is still trying to catch his breath. And what I like about Bill Algeo is that he's a really busy striker on the feet. I could see him having success on the feet, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think he's going to spend too much time there. He's given up takedowns in every one of his UFC fights, and those takedowns that he's going to give up this week are going to lead to him losing rounds. Andre Fili just needs to stick to the game plan, and he should do really well here. For DraftKings, Andre Fili typically doesn't really score that well. Even in his fight with Charles Jourdain, where he secured 5 takedowns, he only scored 77 DraftKings points. So for me, he's not a must roster this week, but I do like him to win this fight. As a straight bet, Andre Fili by decision looks pretty good. And then the last fight that we'll take a look at is Gregory Rodrigues. He's fighting Chidi Njokuani this week. Greg Rodrigues went bananas last time out against Julian Marquez, who was said to have a chin of iron. Greg, with the third leg, knocked him down 3 times and won that fight in the first round. He's so good everywhere. Crisp, powerful boxing, elite jiu-jitsu, and he's a lot younger than he looks. On the other side, Chidi Njokuani has shown some crazy power since coming into the UFC, and he's not looking to drag these guys into deep waters. He's not looking to go to war. Chidi Njokuani wants to knock you out. That's it. And this is a tough one for me to call because I've never gotten a RoboCop fight wrong, and I would hate to see him lose this week, but I do think that's the case. We've seen Greg Rodrigues chin-checked before. Jordan Williams, of all people, knocked him out. Even Julian Marquez during exchanges was catching him cleanly. If Chidi Njokuani lands cleanly, he's going to be looking up at the lights in the apex. And I think the slight reach advantage for Chidi Njokuani is going to play a big factor here as well. I just think a guy with his kind of power is a bad matchup for a friend of the show, Greg Rodrigues. But the pick for me is Chidi Njokuani. And now I'll just quickly run through the plays for you again at 8,000 and below. If you haven't already, drop a like on the video. It's free. So if we take a look, again, we just talked about Chidi Njokuani. Crazy power against somebody who's pretty hittable, keeps his chin way up in the air. Chidi Njokuani by knockout wouldn't surprise me. Bill Algeo, I think if Bill Algeo wins this fight, he could score a decent amount of points, but I do think that he's going to have to really deal with spending a lot of time on his back, and I don't like that for him this week. Sara McMann, I think that Sara McMann has all the tools to get it done this week. I think if she's able to find takedowns, she can break Aspen Ladd. I don't think that Aspen Ladd is that force anymore. I think that her best fighting days are behind her, despite her only being 27. Mariya Agapova, I think she gets wrestled up pretty bad this week. On the feet, she has a chance. She throws crazy hands, but I don't think that she's going to be able to land too much on Gillian Robertson when she's laying on her back. Tony Gravely, always live. Crazy power for the division. Obviously, he's got that takedown upside, so he might be able to find takedowns. Tony Gravely, not a bad choice if you wanted to take a shot down here at 7,600. Marc-Andre, I'm really not interested. Nascimento, I think, has a lot of potential to get this fight to the ground and find a submission. Damon Jackson, the Leech. Action, when did this happen? Hold on. I've been completely blindsided by this nickname change, but Damon Jackson, he's always somebody who's live, but I think Pat Sabatini is a nightmarish matchup for him. Louis Cosce, he's first round or bust. If you want to take a shot on somebody like this at 7,100, that is the name of the game, taking those risks. Song Yadong, I don't think he's there yet to pull off a win over somebody like Cory Sandhagen. Cameron VanCamp, I think that Cameron VanCamp can definitely get it done this week. If I remember correctly, Nikolas Motta was talking about maybe retiring, so who knows what his level of commitment is like right now. Cameron VanCamp came in and let Andre Fiallo knock him out in front of everybody. Just like we knew that was going to happen. Everybody knew that was going to happen. But he got his call from the UFC. He said, let me cash in. Good man. I respect it. And now he's going to be here to win some fights down at the division that makes sense for him. Trey Ogden, I think Trey Ogden goes way under-owned this week, way under the radar, and he could find himself on top and not let this kid up. I think that is the surprising play of the week down at 6,800. Gomes, not interested. Amedov, not interested. And if you have made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. One last time, like the video if you haven't, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I'll see you later in the week.